Okay, so let's continue here with a part 2 to your first question. If helping people far away is always parasitic, what moral principle determines that human compassion should only exist within geographic distance? Truth of reality. Truth is the principle. Morals come later as a part of human life, but morality is not the ultimate principle. The principle that is more important than anything else is the principle of reality and truth. Because reality and truth bring us to harmony with God, reconciliation with God, or even if people don't believe in God, they bring us into reconciliation with the conditions of reality that created us, even if those conditions were accidental and absurd and arbitrary. Reconciling ourselves as well as possible to reality as best as we can understand it. This is one of the ultimate principles. Now, Immanuel Kant, in his philosophy and in Critique of Pure Reason, he taught us that we filter reality through our senses. And so our senses give us an interpretation of ultimate reality, which is the noumena, which we cannot know. And our senses give us an approximation or an analog of reality that he calls the phenomena. So we know the phenomena, we don't know the ultimate noumena. So in terms of knowing everything, again, we're finite, we don't know everything. But we can, with these brains, it seems, have some approximation of reality. If we are using reason and if we are using truth to attempt to reconcile ourselves as best as possible to reality, well, that is the first principle that then gives us all other principles, including moral principles. That is the prerequisite for everything else. That is the a priori for everything else. Nothing else makes sense unless we're trying to integrate with reality. Otherwise, it's just arbitrary flashes of feeling and emotion, disconnected and disintegrated. So, in terms of also thinking through our actions, Immanuel Kant, in terms of principles, not moral principles, but just principles that are rational, that make sense. We have to think in terms of the categorical imperative that he described in Critique of Pure Reason, that if we keep doing this action over and over, and if other people keep doing it like we're doing it, like let's say I do a certain action, let's say I'm sending money to a stranger in Africa who I never met, who lied to me about crossing the border into Zambia and did not meet me a couple of years ago. If I am sending this person money for whatever stories he tells me, and that doesn't mean you don't have a school. You could definitely have a school and still be lying about the needs of the school. So, go back to your messages and learn a little nuance. Fighting against lies is like playing a game of whack-a-mole. Once it's totally in confusion what part of your story is true and what part of your story is a lie, it becomes very difficult to work with. And proving that you're telling the truth about one thing, that you actually have a school, that doesn't prove that you don't have enough food for the children in March. Okay, there's reason. Reason and truth and reality are the first principles before moral principles. Okay, we have to clarify what is reasonable for us to work with. And we also have to clarify what is provable and what is not provable. And so when we're performing actions and we're looking for principles that are rational and reasonable, even competitive principles. I mean, when Robert Greene gives us these 48 laws of competitive power, they don't sound like moral principles, but they do sound like potentially rational principles under some circumstances. We have to be alive before we can be compassionate. Think about that. We have to be alive before we can be compassionate. And to be alive, we have to be somewhat well adapted to reality, or we cannot exist in reality. Do you see that logical sequence there? We and every other animal on this planet, every bacteria, every insect, every hyena, every deer, every sheep, every lion, every human, we all have to be sufficiently adapted to and cooperating with and harmonious with reality to a certain degree in order to exist in reality. Now, the reason why we humans have to be reasonable and rational and try to think in terms of true enough principles or approximations of the truth, the best possible hypothesis that integrates the information we humans have this complicated cerebral cortex. We have all of this language. So as a first principle, we have to go back to the Garden of Eden before the idea of good and evil, before the idea of what we like and what we don't like, what fruit is pleasing to our eyes, before the idea that we could be like gods and try to eliminate human suffering. Before we get into all of that, I feel, to be human, to exist. Before we get into this drama about our existence, we have to actually exist first. And to exist, we have to be in reality, cooperating with reality to a certain degree. And the reality is, we are not gods. We are extremely small and finite. I can go outside and yell at the top of my lungs, and you cannot hear me in Malawi. There's no way my voice can travel across the planet or your voice can travel to me. And so for thousands of years, for millions of years, as we existed in these bodies, presumably, in the form of our grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, when we developed social behaviors to take care of each other as part of successfully living in nature, that did not include having our feelings affected by somebody thousands of miles away. It included being affected by people who we could presumably see on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, once in a while in our environment. And we were living mostly in tribes for most of the history on this planet. If we go back before the agricultural revolution, if we go back tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, the scientific consensus has been that usually there were only about 10 million humans on the planet. On the entire planet, we were spread out in small groups, in small tribes, like in your village. And that's where we developed moral instincts to try to take care of our families and our neighbors, to cooperate as human beings to help us live in reality. Not so that people thousands of miles away could use us for help. That's where we developed ideas of sharing, purity, reciprocity, authority, compassion, and loyalty in a local community. That helps us live. Otherwise, we would die.